Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a fascinating look at how seemingly neutral technical choices are actually deeply philosophical and political decisions that totally shape our world. You know, we tend to think of technology as just a set of tools designed to make our lives more efficient. But what if every single standardized system we interact with is secretly carrying hidden assumptions about what it actually means to be human?
Let's kick things off with a pretty profound thought from the authors of our source material. To hold a tool is to cast a vote. This concept really sets the stage for everything we're going to uncover today. The whole idea here is that technical artifacts are never truly neutral. Every time a system is designed, whether that's a new software update, a bureaucratic form, or even just a physical tool, it embodies specific forms of authority. It's essentially voting for a specific kind of world. And here's the kicker. It's often decided by people who will never actually have to live with the daily consequences of that design.
Section 1. The weight of a handle. We're going to begin our journey in the mountains of Hunan province, looking at something as simple as a farming tool. Imagine a local hoe with a handle that is curved at exactly 17 degrees. Now, this wasn't engineered in some corporate lab. It was adapted over 20 generations to perfectly fit the specific terrace slopes, the local soil resistance, and the actual bodies of the farmers using it. Contrast that with a standardized steel hoe manufactured in Wuhan. Sure, it's stronger, it's cheaper, and it's optimized for mass production. But when this straight hoe replaced the curved one, the farmers' backs began to hurt, and the terrace fields actually started to erode. The straight hoe was built for abstract efficiency. It basically treated all human labor and all soil as totally interchangeable.
Philosopher Yuk Hui has this incredible concept to describe this, called Cosmotechnics. The authors use his work to propose that technical choices are actually, at their core, cosmological choices. That curved hoe isn't just some outdated piece of tech. It represents a fundamentally different way for humans to interact with the world. When we take a tool and standardize it globally, we aren't just spreading efficiency. We're actively destroying other ways of formulating questions and interacting with our environment.
Section 2. When systems replace people.
To see how these standardized systems scale up and, honestly, what gets lost in the process, let's look at the story of a seamstress named Teodora in Romania during the 20th century. Standardized clothing quotas made Teodora's deep embodied knowledge completely illegible to the system. Teodora knew exactly how local wool held heat, and she knew how a farmer's shoulders sat differently than a desk worker's. But when the state introduced standardized patterns just to boost efficiency, her output went up on paper, sure, but the clothes? The clothes she made fit nobody perfectly. Her profound understanding of specific human bodies was just erased, replaced by a system that only understood clothing as identical, measurable units.
The text argues that we see the severe human cost of this erasure in modern bureaucracies, particularly in refugee systems. Take a man named Abdi Hassan Warsame. He was processed through 3 different unlinked systems over the years: paper in 2001, digital in 2009, and biometric in 2014. Because these systems simply couldn't communicate with each other, he was split into 3 completely different digital identities. This administrative failure meant he had to wait 14 agonizing months just to get his status reconciled. That's 14 months of severely delaying critical medical care for his daughter, all because of a database glitch.
The authors outline these as the absolute systemic failure modes of bureaucracy. Basically, the system mistakes its rigid model for the complex territory of real life. It only optimizes for what it can easily measure, like processing speed, while totally ignoring unquantifiable human suffering. It prioritizes its own continuity and legacy infrastructure over the messy reality it's supposed to serve. And critically, because the system assumes its categories are perfect, it cannot fail gracefully. When it encounters something that doesn't neatly fit into its drop-down menus, it just breaks down, leaving real people stranded.
Section 3. The Cosmonaut and the Gap.
Picture this, it's 1965, floating 1,400 kilometers above Kazakhstan. Soviet cosmonaut Alexei Leonov has just become the first human to ever walk in space. Incredible, right? But when he tried to re-enter his spacecraft, his suit had inflated in the vacuum, and he literally couldn't fit back through the airlock. The standard wrench provided by the engineers for anticipated, categorized problems, it offered absolutely no help. The system had prepared for what it could predict, but Leonov was facing a genuinely novel crisis.
To understand how he survived, the authors point to philosopher Hannah Arendt's brilliant distinction between knowing that and knowing how. Knowing that is the kind of information written in a manual. It's universal, it's transferable. But knowing how, that is tacit, embodied knowledge. It exists only in the hands of the practitioner, right in the moment of action, when standard protocols completely fail.
So, the crucial point here is that Leonov survived precisely because of his tacit knowledge. He didn't rely on the standard wrench. Instead, he found the unspoken gap in those rigid protocols and manually bled the pressure from his suit. He risked decompression sickness, but he saved his own life. The authors argue that industrial systems have spent centuries trying to extract this exact kind of tacit knowledge from workers to make them interchangeable. But, as Leonov proved up there in the vacuum of space, the gap is where actual survival happens.
Section 4. What the census forgot.
So how does this systemic rigidity apply to how we classify and count human beings in everyday society? Well, let's look at the history of data processing. 80. That is the number of columns on Herman Hollerith's 1890 punched card. Think about that. Just 80 characters were used to sum up an entire human life to the state. This single engineering decision dictated the maximum complexity of a human record in administrative systems for decades to come. The authors argue that this theory of population, the idea that a complex human being can be reduced to a finite set of checkboxes, has been completely naturalized into how our governments operate today.
In just 0.3 seconds, literally the blink of an eye, that tabulating machine processed a man named James Elijah Calloway as a 1 in the idiotic column. Why? Simply because he couldn't read the enumerator's language. In that tiny fraction of a second, the system completely erased his fluency in 3 other languages, his ability to navigate by the stars, and his deep botanical knowledge of 200 medicinal plants. The system didn't have a column for his specific brand of intelligence, so it just classified him as noise. The authors view this as a literal form of epistemic violence, and it's hard to disagree.
Section 5. Navigating by Dead Reckoning.
Let's scale things up again to see how we orient the entire planet. Back in 1154, maps were commonly drawn with south at the top, but by 1884, global representatives met and chose Greenwich as the prime meridian, placing north at the top. Now, this wasn't just some neutral technical choice. The authors note it was deeply, deeply tied to the British Empire's naval navigation and trade routes. Yet, every single modern GPS system we use today inherits this exact orientation, basically locking in a specific geopolitical worldview as if it were a natural fact of geography.
In navigation, there's this concept called dead reckoning, which basically means estimating your current position based on your past position. The problem? It compounds errors over time. The authors suggest our modern systems have essentially been navigating by a 500-year dead reckoning error. Because we've built all our tech on top of these old imperial frameworks, the societal and ecological errors are just compounding. To correct our course, the text argues, we urgently need alternative perspectives. We need an independent positional fix, something like acknowledging the validity of the medieval South-Up map or embracing indigenous ecological management.
Section 6. The unpaid inheritance tax. Finally, let's examine the hidden, material costs of our most modern, seemingly weightless infrastructure, the cloud. 100 million. That is how many gallons of water a single server farm in Oregon draws from the local Crooked River every single year. And this massive amount of water is used just to cool the processors running the algorithms that moderate global online speech. We tend to think of the cloud as this floating, ethereal thing, but the authors emphasize that it is fiercely physical. It consumes massive amounts of natural resources from very specific, local environments.
The text introduces this really fascinating concept called infrastructural rent. This is the excess profit these massive tech systems capture by essentially acting as freeloaders on history. The cheap water and labor they rely on, those are subsidies extracted from past colonial land laws, displaced populations, and ongoing ecological depletion. The tech companies reap all the benefits, acting as an unpaid inheritance tax that gets passed down from generations of externalized costs.
To truly understand this cost, just compare what these two entities know. The server farm, it only knows how many gallons it needs, the current market price, and its legal compliance limits. But the river holds 10,000 years of complex ecological memory. It knows exactly when the salmon need cold water and how the soil absorbs the seasonal rains. Our current standardized accounting systems completely fail to capture this holistic environmental cost, prioritizing the server farm's flat metrics over the river's deep, interconnected knowledge.
From a curved hoe in Hunan to a cosmonaut stranded in space, and from 19th century census cards to massive modern server farms, the authors challenge us to look at the invisible borders our standardized systems draw around us. I'm going to leave you with this provocative question to carry with you. The next time you interact with the digital form or a bureaucratic process, ask yourself, what vital, messy, beautifully human knowledge is the system simply unable to hold?